thank you so much for joining us on this conversation about the future of entertainment and media. We have an incredible array of panelists. We actually initially had 2 panels because we just had so much talent, but we decided to combine it because I think so many of the themes are very complementary, whether you're talking about print media or music or entertainment. So we're going to put it all together. And we have a really impressive lineup here. Matt Sorum, among many other things, is an inductee to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He's a Grammy winner. Stefan is a 20-year music industry veteran who is now embarking on a new venture in blockchain. Heidi Pease, among other things, runs the LA Blockchain Lab. Pablo is the founder of STHORM, which has many incredible companies under its umbrella. Daniel is a real technologist who is actively building solutions to capture value for artists. And Aaron Stanley is a reporter with CoinDesk. So lots of experts to glean wisdom from. And I guess just to start, I'd love to hear, and we're going to keep this very pithy because it's 8 p.m. and 8 p.m. panels are no fun unless the answers are short. In 30 seconds, why blockchain captured your interest? And we'll start with you, Matt.
I got into blockchain as a solution for emerging artists especially, and to find some solutions to what's happening with my personal publishing catalog. You know, basically all the data that I have to search out, go through lawyers, publishers, managers, agents, and that started to interest me when I found out blockchain could alleviate a lot of those problems.
And we do have to share the mic, so if you don't mind.
All right, so yeah, I basically got into the blockchain space because I was so impressed by this technology that it would, you know, be absolutely suitable for our business. My business is, you know, digital rights and copyrights across the board, and I thought it would be really compelling to have a technology that takes egos out of the way, which is one of the biggest problems in our industry, and also, you know, enables like trust and transparency in a market that is basically you know, working with mostly distrustful behavior and a lot of, you know, many people trying to do things in a very intransparent way.
So the real honest answer for me getting into blockchain, totally transparent here, is I come from an extremely very, very poor and uneducated family. A welfare child, sometimes didn't know if we were gonna have something to eat for dinner. And they were my family was very against education, and unfortunately I had experienced a lot of barriers in my life growing up. And so when I came across blockchain and its potential impact to reduce barriers and democratize accessibility to knowledge and wealth, I just knew this was my calling. And so here I am, and I feel very humbled and blessed to be a part of it.
So for me, blockchain is much more about the philosophy behind it, that I really think that we need to decentralize a lot of things if you want to change a lot of things. If you want to remake the rules and change the old rules and do it another way, we need the philosophy behind the blockchain much more than technology. So blockchain for me is much more than a philosophy in a way of life. It should be the full. That's it.
Hello. I've been an open protocol evangelist since I ran an ISP in the mid-90s. And when blockchain came along, I was a bit of a skeptic, actually, the whole hype machine. And that changed when I was invited to participate in an EU-funded project called Blumen. And it's a blockchain and media project. So I got into blockchain that way. And also, I was also invited earlier this year to assist with the launch of EOS DAC, which is a DAC based on EOS, which airdropped a load of tokens to the EOS community. And that was very interesting too. So it's an exciting world.
So I was first introduced back in 2016 when I had my first run-in with crypto Twitter. And I'd been commissioned to write an article about the Winklevoss twins and the Bitcoin ETF. back in fall of 2016, and the story came out, and I was immediately sort of met with the barrage of crypto Twitter, and I realized, like, just with the tenacity and the enthusiasm and the engagement of this community, like, there's something here I should be paying attention to, and that's kind of what got me digging a bit more into blockchain and kind of getting into some of these ideas.
So Matt, I'm going to start with you because I think it's helpful if we paint the picture of where we are now in terms of how artists and creators are able to capture value from what they're creating. So what has been your experience in creating and kind of the payout from that?
We could go back a little ways to the old model of music, okay? When the model was you were an artist that created art, music, film, and you would go and you would get a traditional deal from said, label of sorts. They would do all the work putting the content out, the music, the physical product, before digital came. So in those days, record sales were a much higher level. For instance, Guns N' Roses, my old band, we sold 65 million copies. Total. It might be even up to 75 or 80 million by this point. Last number was 65 million. And then when digital music came along, that all changed. All of a sudden, now we were in a digital market with Steve Jobs creating Apple, and all of a sudden we were a singles game. So what happened was physical sales dropped, digital sales and downloads became a singles game. We weren't selling albums as much. So we started losing revenue. As artists, we got the same shares we got for physical. And what happened was the music that we created all of a sudden became a way for us to only tour. Now and the way it is today is we put out music as a way to tour. Only the very upper echelon elite artists are able to monetize their music on a digital platform. The Beyoncés, Jay-Z's of the world. All the other artists that used to get traditional record deals could, in the old days, get an advance on an album, get tour support, all those sorts of things. And then after the digital thing basically dropped the market, all of a sudden it became about the live part of the equation. And now the ticket prices, if you notice when you go to a concert, the ticket price is much higher. Why? Because the artist can't survive on record sales alone. So my experience has gone full circle from my first record deal back in the 80s when I was in a band called The Cult, all the way to fast forward when I saw a recent deal which was called the 360. Now the label wants to own your merchandise and your touring. And I say to them, why? Because you screwed up selling the records. And you gave away singles rights when you never even allowed us to have anything to say about it. When Steve Jobs started allowing singles at 99 cents per download, that wasn't a discussion that we had with the artists. That was a discussion he had with the labels. And at that time, the labels thought that digital was non-threatening. So they never thought that that was going to compete in the physical market. Well, that changed the face of music. And ever since then, we've been trying to claw our way back. But what's happened in the digital world is now everyone's trying to upload and compete in a social media world that is cluttered. It's actually more cluttered now than it was before. There was a time when you used to buy a record and you would fall in love with that artist and you would hold that album and you were only about Led Zeppelin or you were only about the Beatles. And now it's just so much out there. How does a new artist find its way when it's all about social media? So what's happened now is that an artist spends more time trying to appear, and they're spending 85 to 90% of their time trying to create a social media presence when they should be creating art and letting the other people do the work. That's where Artbit comes in. And thank you. Yeah, that's what I say to young artists. I say, oh my God, I couldn't even imagine being a young artist now and trying to compete. It's so difficult. People say, hey, put your song on Apple, put your song on Spotify, upload your music. Great. Good luck getting found because it's still an elitist world. It's still political. Spotify, there's still the ivory tower, the guy's getting the big paycheck and the big building and all the other stuff that goes with that. And then you got to have a guy that knows the guy that does the playlist for Spotify. It's all politics. And so the world of blockchain is so exciting to me because everything can be transparent and the audience can push the artist and let the artist be an artist.
Thank you so much. I don't know if we could have gotten better insight from anybody. And what you seem to be describing is this very complex value chain, which really lends itself to opacity. And that means that we don't really know where much of this value is going. And Stefan, I wish from the industry perspective, you could kind of describe how you've interfaced with that value chain and what you and Bitfury Surround are doing to change that.
Yeah, I can just, I mean, it was perfectly described, Matt, because that's, from an industry perspective, the same thing happened, and it didn't, I think the biggest, of course, the biggest break happened after, the CD, when the physical product was really starting to go down, and it was replaced by some kind of still individual products that were digitized, and then, of course, unbundled, like track-based systems and ringtones and stuff like that, which was kind of still okay because it was individually you could individually allocate it to, at that time, also few people like Dr. Dre and these guys. They made hundreds of millions of ringtone sales over telco networks. But afterwards, when the shift happened from the, really like going more into the data-driven side, and when data is, the new oil, then the music industry was not at all prepared to even understand the value of data and to translate it into their individual relationships, artist agreements, and to make really like this transition into a data-driven, a business. And even in their relationship with the artists, they had the responsibility to do so, but because of like really short-sighted shareholder value stuff, basically they got trapped, and they did not really effectively go through this stage with the digital platforms, especially because the user engagement that Facebook and Google and all these guys were basically creating was so compelling for everybody to really like. It was more like you didn't go to the root. You were just trying to soothe the pain real quick and see if you can get some promotional value out of this. Now, what that has led us to is like a very competitive game and a very small puddle of of water, whereas there's a huge data ocean out there that we cannot, that the industry, I'm talking about, publishing labels, even, artists and everything. We are really coming from the artistic perspective, just like Matt, because that's where it all starts, that they were actually battling and fighting in a very, very small, almost meaningless puddle, compared to this huge data ocean, where each of these companies is as big as a whole household of a country. So we're talking about, like, I don't know, 30, 40 billion industry. That's ridiculous compared to how much value is being generated by the data that the fans, generate through Rihanna, Drake, and all these guys, but to all small artists, 2 million artists across the world. I mean, this is really completely crazy, and this has to be turned around, and it can only be turned around if there would be like an individual allocation of value for each piece of content, and if there is an asset-driven democracy where the artist gets hold of his work and he can determine, get data and act on this data for his own, career, and to make a living out of it, because otherwise, our creativity the creativity of the world is completely going to go down the drain. There is absolutely, no incentive for people to start a career, and definitely not commercially, like Matt was saying. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I know Heidi with Proof of Art, and Pablo with STHORM, and Artbit, and Daniel with Bloomin', you're all working on additional solutions focused on capturing this value. In a few words, can you just tell us what you're doing and how that would happen?
Sure, that is a great question, Mercina. I think the best way to explain that is maybe just a little bit about the day in the life of an artist. And I'm just going to give you a snapshot. I used to belong to the Screen Actors Guild, which is the professional union for actors in Los Angeles. And, obviously not successful. I was in a couple telenovelas, what do you call them? Daytime dramas here and there. Ian was also a fellow actor. And so I'm speaking from the heart here. This is the typical life. And an actor is just an illustration of all other types of content creators in general. They can be musicians, chefs, fashion designers, but this is it. You may or may not go to school. If you go to school for it, you're usually carrying some sort of debt. Graduate, now you hustle like crazy. You get a nighttime job so that during the day you can go on auditions. And you've got this bill on your head. You're in LA, one of the most expensive cities in the United States to live in. So you're hustling, you're waiting tables, whatever that might be. You get home, hopefully you've got auditions, you practice your talent, and then you manage your social media account. Hopefully you get, and this is all before you even get an agent. You're building your reel, you're collaborating with other artists so that you build your reel. You hope that that other artist, that other director who's giving you this job actually does give you that reel. You don't know. There's so many times I've worked and not gotten anything from it. So eventually you're building this reel, then you take this reel, you shoot it out to hopefully get a manager. You're still managing your day-to-day. Okay, if I contract with this person, what about the taxes? What about the legal forms? All of this. Then your manager takes that information, whatever it is, and it's uploaded onto the internet. And you know as soon as that happens, your content is stolen. So but this is why there are all these middlemen. It was in a way to help the artist get in front of, help them with contracts, get them in front of the right person. But what's happened is they've convoluted the whole entire process and taken food out of the value chain, literally food out of the mouth of the artist. So we're at Proof of Art looking at how can we help with all of that business stuff that I'm saying me as an artist just does not like. The legal contracts, the fundraising, the community building, the reputation, people who you work with, and so forth. So there you go. That's the day in the life of an artist.
And Pablo, can you tell us about Artbit and what you're doing there?
Sure. For me, it was more. I was in the music business for 10 years, 12 years. So, and for me, that's the biggest shift was when there was a shift in the how we consume content, what kind of content we consume. Because before we used to consume like mainstream content, like Rihanna, as you said, and in Hollywood films. And after internet, there was a process started. We started to consume everyday people content, and brands they are used to pay for mainstream content. They pay a lot of money to have STHORM, to have Guns N' Roses, Rihanna, but there's nothing there for us. So we became the employees for the social network, for the internet. Now we produce about 90% of internet's content. And there's still nothing there for us, but there's a lot for the mainstream guys. So we try to think about how can we try to change that? How can we? Because we are in the end of the day, we are the creators, we are the directors, we are the daredevils. We are we create and consume the content, and Artbit is about this. So it's about to find a solution. How can we try to change that and say, hey. That we are the big content producers. So you guys have to talk to us, not talk only to the publishers, to the Facebook, to the social networks. Because I don't think that those social networks are for free. I think that it's really expensive. And people just don't realize that. That's it.
And Daniel, what does your solution look like?
Sure. So Kendraio is a non-profit open source company, and we're building the Kendraio app, which is basically answering a lot of the issues that have been talked about here about the frustration with too much admin, the frustration with too many actual places to go and sell your content. You have to do social media, and too much data to even discover how you might process it or visualize it. So we're creating an app which is a dashboard that will allow a creator and their managers, and we're doing it for the sectors of the music, video, and images, and also we've been asked by galleries to do it for to asset management for physical works as well, which is quite interesting. Asset management and also linking into services. So we're plugging into services and bringing all of that information here. I was speaking to a guy on Monday, and he said, well, it sounds like Minority Report. You know, you're dragging things all over the place and visualizing and twisting things. And that's exactly kind of where we're going to go with this. I think that will take a few years itself, but we're building the infrastructure so that we can download sales reports. We can visualize from multiple places and then say, let's do comparisons. What is it like in this country? And what was the effect of me, the sale of, or that gig there, you know, and how did it affect sales? So I think that's, these are the tools that enterprises have. These are the tools that the big content creators have in their arsenal. And I think what we're really interested in doing is bringing this back to smaller artists and creators so that they can spend more time doing, exactly you're saying, more time doing art and less time doing admin. Yeah, thank you.
Aaron, you have a slightly different perspective, but I think that you're faced with many of the same problems, this surfeit of free resources. Journalism has really struggled to capture value other than advertising. And so I'm wondering how you view blockchain interfacing not just as kind of what you cover as a journalist, but in terms of micropayments and other ways to monetize intellectual property that exists on the web.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's so many parallels with everything that you all have been describing that it's almost, you know, eerily similar. And you know, as a former aspiring musician, I can sort of relate to some of the. You know, I guess I'm sort of thankful maybe I didn't go into that industry, you know. But anyway, so yeah, media is definitely facing a crisis. I mean, I think it's a fundamental business model problem, right? And we're under a lot of pressure. You know, there's people like criticizing us for fake news and sort of, you know, not. You know, I mean, media is under more scrutiny now than it's ever been, and it should be under scrutiny. Media should be scrutinized. But I think the issue is like there's just a fundamental business model issue here, where just clicks alone to your website is not, or printing newspapers is you're not making money printing newspapers anymore. You're just getting clicks alone to your website. I mean, the sheer volume of clicks you would need, it's basically the same as with music, where the elites of the elite websites will be able to monetize that, but anybody who's, you know, outside that top 5% is that's a loss there as well. So at CoinDesk we have an events arm, we have a research arm that kind of subsidizes the editorial arm, and there's, you know, and you'll see with say the Washington Post or the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, all of these organizations have you know, wealthy people that own them that can sort of subsidize the operations, right? So that's kind of the only real model that works right now, and so I'm really intrigued by this idea of, you know, a micropayments platform, right? Where I'm, you know, as a person who's grown up accustomed to reading news for free, like someone on the previous panel was saying, like it's tough to beat free. I don't necessarily want to be paying for the content that I read, but I think as there's going to be a premium placed on quality. There's so much content out there that there's a need for curation, right? There's a brand that I trust that I want to source that content from. And you know, maybe I'm not comfortable paying $20 a month for this, but maybe I am comfortable paying 10 cents per article or something. I don't know how exactly the numbers would all add up on that, but you know, I don't want to pay $10 a month to 15 different news sites, but I wouldn't mind paying, you know, 10 or 15 cents an article for each article that I read, perhaps. So I think this whole idea of micropayments, and I know there's been some folks experimenting with this, and I'm not sure there's been a whole lot of real success on this front, but I think that I'm intrigued by the potential that blockchain has as just a fundamentally reverting that business problem model that media has right now.
I'd just like to get your thoughts on micropayments and fake news, and whether there's any possibility, in your view, to combat fake news by implementing some kind of barrier to entry, because anybody can contribute. There's no filter. So how can we work towards kind of a more truthful model?
I don't know. I wrestle with this a lot. I mean, I agree with the fake news issue, but then I'm like I am supportive of quality content and truthful content, but then at the same time when I go back to sort of the blockchain side and the censorship resistance side, like how, is it if we believe in, I don't know how to say this like diplomatically, but I guess I kind of wrestle with, I haven't really seen any plausible way for how that, like I've seen what Civil has done. It's kind of an interesting sort of experiment, but in my mind, at least that's how I understand it. I don't really see that as the solution, I guess. But I'm thinking like, I mean, as if quality content is being incentivized and the people who create that quality, like there are a lot of people, I mean, just this week, I've had people asking me like, why is crypto journalism so bad? Not CoinDesk, of course, but like, but people ask me this, and I'm like, well, I mean, the reason is that a lot of these sites, they end up doing pay to play stuff or sponsored things because they have to, like that's the only way they can make money, and a lot of some of the articles that are published are so bad because the journalist is getting paid like $50 an article, and they just have to keep incentivized to just churn out content, and it's a volume over a quantity or a quality game. So I think as long as we're able to find some way to incentivize good writers to produce good content, I mean, I think that's the only real solution. I don't really see this. I mean, I don't really want to get into the side of like censoring or using, filtering things out in a way that would sort of, bring a new layer of centralization, because I see that as kind of just sort of, I don't really see that as an improvement over the current system, I guess.
Yeah, it's not, I don't know that we have an answer for that yet, but I do think it's something to think on. And
May I speak to that? Just
very quickly,
okay,
yes.
Well, rather than trying to establish what is fake news, we, Kendraio looked at Kendraio Verify, and we looked at what we could do to verify what is true news. So there's a different way of looking at it. A lot of people have done AI algorithms for fake news, but rather than, why not get people to digitally sign, yeah, that's me, that was me who took the photo, that was me in the photo, that, this is my right. So it links also into the rights as well. We need to digitally sign these facts before we put them onto the blockchain. So we need to verify these facts. So there you go. It's a quick answer.
I think that's a great point. And there's been this theme throughout all of these answers about empowerment and kind of democratizing these various industries and verticals. And sometimes when we talk about blockchain, we hear it referred to as kind of the end of intermediaries. But at least in entertainment, there are a lot of important intermediaries who actually add critical value. And so I'm wondering if you can speak to start, kind of which intermediaries add substance and what we can do without.
Well, I could give an example of how the blockchain would work in the artist's behalf on a couple examples, and the guys that maybe you could cut from the food chain. Basically, licensing is a real issue. Let's say you want to license a piece of music. You have a film, you're an independent filmmaker, you're interested in licensing this song. You don't actually know who to go to license that song. You look it up, you see a publishing company, you got to call the publisher, then you got to get somebody to call you back, all those sorts of things. There's ways to do this with the blockchain that really excites me. The idea of smart contracts, and for instance, I'll just give an example. I was talking to Stefan earlier about Moby, the artist Moby. He's a vegan. He doesn't want to have anything to do with milk, meat, or alcohol. And he said to his publisher, license to all the rest. So a said artist could go on the blockchain with a smart contract, fill out everything that he doesn't want to be involved with, clear that. Someone could come up, license that piece of music on that node, that blockchain, and not have to go through that entire food chain. That's basically impossible in my line of work. You have to go through the management, the agent, so on and so forth, right? So as far as just an idea of the download or the streaming thing excites me in the future. I feel that streaming and downloading should be on the blockchain based on all the contributors to that said piece of music, the producer, all the writers, even the label, the manager, who's ever involved in that piece of music, can all get paid out automatically in real time. And that's the future. And with blockchain, we could do that. We could sign up and we can create content for them. And we could do that with music, art. We could collaborate. And, we've already given it away. Why can't we own it? Intellectual property, it's ours. It's my likeness. So that's kind of stuff that you can alleviate, especially in the music business.
Stefan, I know your platform is looking for buy-in from both artists and industry. And I'm wondering, as the power dynamic shifts and as creators are empowered, why would the industry kind of want to buy into these new models? And how do you anticipate getting these traditional actors to support these new blockchain-based solutions, which will ultimately cut a lot of the value that they've historically gleaned from the market?
Because, sorry, no worries, thank you, man. The answer to that is actually pretty simple, because it's inevitable. So it's going to happen. I was just talking about this afternoon, the wall came down too, it's going to happen. There's absolutely no way that the system as it is today is ever going to sustain. That's full stop. So that means either you start to realize that there's more value coming out of a collaborative environment than a competitive environment, or not. If you don't buy into this, then you will definitely not survive the next 50 years. That's 100% sure. And so it's only going, what is very important and challenging is to start this process. So starting this process also means that we have to put things together in a way that the business itself and the reality of the business and an everyday life of a brand, everyday life of an artist, everyday life of a label, publisher, and who else, that needs to be put on a level that everybody can collaborate on. And this is what we are focused on with Surround, that we are saying, let's build an open infrastructure rather than selling blockchain infrastructure to each individual parties, like in software as a service. We put an open infrastructure out into the world, of music, entertainment, and ultimately, of course, for, it's going to be feasible for, or can be used for other copyright assets, of course, in which we encourage and enable people to collaborate and companies to collaborate and artists to make money and to put it into the middle of their business reality on an everyday basis. This is so far been not the case in the crypto space and the blockchain world, because the reality is that the systems are old inside a label, for example. You can start with the smart contracts, but what are we going to do with all the old contracts? It has to be downgradable in a sense that they can take old contracts and modify them. How is the money going to be put from A to B? How can an artist or a family office of an artist put the efficiency gains, the money that they were actually making, or the value that they are being allocated? How can they put it into their P&L? How does it work in your business statement on an everyday basis? How can it translate maybe in crypto in the future, or how can it be distributed amongst everybody else? Like, for example, we are thinking about creating an open vertical that, unlike in other cases, is really splitting the efficiency gains and transformational gains amongst all the people that are part of this system. So amongst artists and labels and everybody likewise, in a fair way. This kind of process needs to have some, let's say, more constitutional push. And this is why I'm very happy that Bitfury bought into this idea, and Val has this vision also with me or with us to push this forward, because it takes a lot of, I would say, sacrifice to say, okay, we're not going to make money for a couple of years, but we're going to put it out there because we ultimately believe that there is something coming out of this that everybody can use, and everybody can develop on this. I mean, it's beautiful. Develop a new streaming service, no problem. But the main thing is, or develop marketing solutions, or let's take on the administrative process. I mean, you have 4 to 5 different parties administrating on top of each other. Every single layer is definitely going to be subtracted from the artist's statement. That's 100% sure. And even if there is another layer, it will also be subtracted. And the problem is because the value is not allocated to the smallest piece of the action, which is actually the most important piece, the copyright piece. This is the biggest issue. You know, like 20 years ago, if you had a merchandising contract with somebody, they would have tied you down and said, how many units did you sell? What happened? What happened to this value? How many shirts were printed? Somebody would stand next to your printing machine and counting the copies. Now it's Facebook, it's all cool, it's easy. Let the value go away, 100 million streams, whatever. We don't care, we just want 10 euros for that, that's fine. Because we were really not prepared from a business perspective. So now we're putting a business layer out there that can help this, enable this, can do maybe, you know, work with the Lightning Network or other things to do a lot of microtransaction, transactions can be anchored maybe every half an hour or every 10 minutes so everybody can publicly see it and everybody is invited to collaborate and work on this structure, whatever kind of solution it is. I think this is a very powerful idea. I love it. That's why we are in here in this and this is, in my opinion, the only way to go. If we don't strengthen or if we don't get control over these assets, it's never going to happen because the other side, they just, the value people, the data people, they don't care. They just want the consumer, they just want the, the consumer engagement, they want the data to move. And to be quite honest, the needle that they move with their own content is really shit. They don't do a lot with their own content. It's, you know, the millions of artists out there that really have the gift and they can do it. They provide so much more value. I completely agree with you, but you know that's exactly the point. The business model, the business structure itself is tied around the wrong kind of value allocation. And that's what we want to turn around in an open source way.
Well, and what I love about both of your perspectives is that you're clearly viewing this as a problem that needs a solution. And too often with blockchain, we see it the other way around. But Heidi, I know you have a lot of experience with the industry as well, especially in your role with the LA Blockchain Lab. And I'm wondering if you can talk about kind of how you're navigating that challenge of getting industry to buy into these new models which don't obviously benefit them.
Yeah, that's we're laughing because we just had this conversation. So, yeah, first of all, just to make this clear, when we say the entertainment industry, what are we talking about? We can talk about music, we can talk about film, television, books, and then within that there's layers. There's distribution, there's legal, there's actual content management, creation. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. The entertainment has the world's largest digital supply chain. And it actually is the most decentralized distributed industry probably in the world. And so I mention this because recently I do work with some of the largest industry leaders in entertainment in Hollywood who have come to me, and I originally thought, oh, they don't want to be involved, and it's actually quite different. They came to say, we are looking for solutions in blockchain. And how can we use that? And Live Nation, actually a ticketing event, the world's largest live event ticketing company, purchased a blockchain company to help them with their digital tracking of tickets. Talent agencies have come to me and said, how can we start using blockchain and smart contracts and all of the administration? So they're seeing it. They're very, very aware. Me as an artist now, if I put my artist hat on, I want to make sure that we get some of these tools out there really quick so we actually empower the artists just as much as the industry is empowered.
And that's a perfect segue to my next question, which is, Pablo, how long do we have to wait before we can use Artbit?
I have no clue. It's too many challengers. So we are in a pilot now, so I hope in middle of July we have something that we can start to try if it's the investors. So I think mid-July. But I want to say something about this use case. So in my country, Brazil, only my state in São Paulo, we have around 20,000 shows a day, live shows. Small ones, so a guy with a guitar playing for 10 guys, and big ones, 20,000 a day. So it's huge, right? So going back what you guys talking about. So, and there's a lot, one thing that is happening there's a lot of corruption in my country, okay? So we have a central organization, you know, you guys are familiar with central organizations, right? So that have the role to collect all the copyrights, all the rights, and give to Matt Sorum, because someone in Brazil now is singing, "You Could Be Mine." It's playing "You Could Be Mine." So that's something there for him, okay? And also, who is singing there, doesn't matter if it's for 10 people or it's for 1,000 people, the interpreter, the band that make the cover, is something there for them, yeah. Because there's a law in my country that says that if you interpret something like a art piece, a song, the guy that is promoting the show, the owner of the small bar or a big show house, they have to pay for that, okay? So if you ask Matt how much he get from Brazil for live shows for last year, is about nothing, right? Yeah, because the central organization keep everything. Because the guys that work for the central organization, they go to the little bar and big house shows owners and say, okay, give me $1,000 and you can do whatever shows you want every day, okay? So we have Alexa guy here that, you know, you got, and we could say have Alexa in our phone or just a microphone that's listening to that, and you can just tell the guys that are performing that that's something there for you as well, if you tell us what's happening. So that's what I think is a use case for a country like mine when you have this level of corruption. You can fix the entire market, because if you ask any mainstream artist, nothing comes from those kind of third world countries, the development countries, to them. And they are producing art for forever. So this is something that we want to attach and we're thinking about. And I think blockchain will solve maybe, I don't know if 1 year, 10 or 20, but I think in the future that there's not space for this kind of corruption anymore because of blockchain.
Daniel, I'm interested in getting a timeline from you as well, Blumen, and then I'd also like for you to comment on the question of kind of open protocols. We have a couple of distinct solutions that have been outlined here. I'm wondering how they're going to work together. Are they going to work together? Is there going to be a winner? How do you see that playing out?
Oh my God. Okay, so first off about the intermediaries, because it's really important to talk about that, because there's a lot of people out there who are still really necessary, and we talked about that. And I want to reframe it, intermediary into a collaborator. And I also want to put the artist in the center of that. So yeah, I'm going to drag in a manager for a week, and I'm going to play with that, and I'll see how, oh no, I don't like that one. So I'm going to use another one. So it's about putting the artist or the creator or the owner in the center and letting them play with different systems, different configurations really easily. And you'll be able to do that when things are fluid and they're standardized. So that's one aspect. The idea that there will be winners anymore, I think it's a crazy idea, and I think it fuels a lot of people's desire to run a business, but I think it's the wrong motivation. I think businesses should be working 50% on their vertical and 50% on collaboration, because I think the collaboration part, the open protocol that we should be talking to each other and messaging each other and sharing and having federated systems, that's really important to get a fluid ecosystem where data is portable and artists have the freedom to move between and experiment with different services. In terms of time scale, I think that's well, you got to say it's an unknown, and a lot of it depends on the investment from philanthropists in our case, because we're non-profit and we can't buy shares in Kendraio. So and normal investors in other companies. So I'm not a fortune teller, and I don't believe anyone who says it's going to take this long or this is going to happen at this point. What the kind of people I like to talk with are the people that are inspired to actually say, this is what I want in my life, or this is what I want to see in the world. That's the kind of person I would work with.
Thank you. So I'm keen to open up the conversation to a couple of questions, but before I do that, Aaron, I'm curious, we are all relatively technologically literate in this room, and I'm worried that too many of the solutions that we're creating will increase kind of inequality generally, as they're difficult to understand and as the users are the elite class because they're the ones who really grasp the value that can be captured by these new technological innovations. So how do we reach those audiences or those populations that have historically been marginalized and underreached? And how do we tell this story in a way that anyone can understand?
Yeah, I mean that's sort of the core. When I look at kind of blockchain as a whole, that's sort of the point I keep sort of coming back to is that the people that would benefit the most from these systems are the people that have the highest barriers to entry to using them. And I mean, in basically any sector that we're talking about. And I mean, I think currently it comes down to, I mean, I think there's probably more issues than this, but I kind of break it down to, you know, there's kind of the scalability issues with the existing platforms. And then there's also like kind of the user experience, user interface problem. Like it seems like any kind of conversation we have about, you know, driving user adoption of such and such DApp or such and such protocol ends with like a but the user experience stinks. So I think I've actually been encountering lately a lot of people from, you know, actual like graphic design, you know, product backgrounds who have been, you know, done impressive work in you know, mainstream industries and designing user-friendly products who are kind of coming into this to help. They see that there's a user experience problem and they want to, you know, dive into that and make these things more user-friendly. I think it really starts with that. I mean, anyone who's spent time in the developing world, my wife is from Brazil and, you know, they're the most, you know, tech savvy, you know, people I've ever met in my life. And I think people can figure out, people are smart enough to figure out how to use these things once they realize the value of them. And we have to get to the point where the products actually offer more value than the existing alternatives. I guess that's kind of like, I mean, that's sort of the crux of the matter right there. And we're just not there yet.
So unless anyone else here is burning to answer that question. Oh, okay.
I am. I'm burning. With Artbit, it's micropayments for the audience, for the user. That's the answer. To incentivize the audience, the people that are going to be providing the content, they're going to get paid for providing that content with micropayments. And the way that's going to work is they're going to collaborate with artists, and the brands are going to pay the bill. And we're going to work with brands, and we're going to help them get more workforce than they've ever seen in their life. And I believe incentivizing the user to come will work for Artbit. And on my end, that's why I'm here. I'm head of communications. To jumpstart the project, you get somebody that owns all their publishing. They license their own music. They have no management that will hold them back. They get their 15% just like they always have. And a guy like me can go direct to some of these bigger artists and get them to come on board. Once that happens, then you're on, you know, you're in the eyeballs of a lot of people around the world. But then that all comes back to the emerging artist and helping them. That's really what I started this with. But obviously we know that in the real world, especially in the startup world, that you have to move quicker and you have to really make impact. So finding the right partners and, you know, all these people collaborating, and everyone working towards the same goal. And it's to bring it back to the community, you know, and the artist. And man, I always say, you know, I'm the artist. How did my manager take over my career? I'm actually, you work for me. You know, my agent, you work for me. It's not the other way around. And a lot of times that's something that gets switched up on you somehow. But yeah, that's basically how it's going to work for us. So I see solutions in the blockchain only. That's the only way it will work.
So I would love to get some feedback from the audience. If we have any questions, we can this mic away.
Hey guys, so my name is Bob Burnquist. I'm a professional skateboarder. I'm here with STHORM, and it's exciting to hear everyone. And you know, I'm sitting here listening to everything and looking at how skateboarders are so constantly creating content. And you know, when I go out there to try and find something to film, you know, I want to make sure the composition's good. Maybe there's some good art in the background, and you know, maybe this certain architecture works good. So I've started actually creating. I get a friend of mine to put an art on the wall, and then we go in and we film that. And then after that, I post it on Instagram and I go give it to someone else, right? So, but in understanding how music and skateboarding, you know, goes together, and art and everything, and how to collaborate and maybe create. Because I love editing, you know. So we go and we find the different tricks. We put like maybe 30 to 40 seconds of strong tricks that took a long time. Maybe you broke bones to get, you know, and that you won't probably get again. So that becomes something that I'd like to hold on so that I can also get my checks. But, you know, I don't get them from ESPN. You know, I skated the contest, that's that, and they got that. So how to integrate and create, you know, this strong edit to then calling up a musician and an artist and going, hey, let's collaborate on this project so that we can put out, and then that on the smart contract, you know, could be commercialized. You know, I've been lucky enough to commercialize it with Instagram a couple of times. They called me and they bought the one clip to promote, but that's rare, right? So how do I do that to where, you know, there's a place, and it's exciting to see. But sports comes in a huge way in this, and I'd just like to see what you guys think about that.
I'm so glad you brought that up. Big thank you, because you're a creator, right? Anybody who's a creator is going to, and they want to collaborate, are going to find this. I had this same situation. How do you collaborate? How do you know when you find this person that you trust them to follow through? And today, and correct me if I'm wrong, but today it's really just reputation and word of mouth. But we're creating with Proof of Art a reputation system, so you know who to collaborate with to do the editing. It's like an Angie's List, if you're familiar with Angie's List. Oh, okay, so Angie's List, the community, you can get a plumber, and then you give them a 4-star or 1-star, and it's a reputation type of thing. So we're doing the same thing for the artist community. We're starting with artists, but that can grow to be athletes. It's a community building reputation system. And then that provides transparency and accountability, and then you don't have to worry about all of the paperwork and the legal, all of that yucky muck that happens. That Proof of Art will take care of that. So you can go to Proof of Art, find who you want to collaborate with, make sure there's a reputation score, and then all of the business logistics and legal stuff can be taken care of.
Yeah. So from a you know, industry perspective, and in a more general sense, this is something that needs, you know, that's everyday work. It has never been, let's say, automated in a granular way like this. No offense, but it's of course been more, you know, working for Sync on rather, you know, like big advertising commercials or movie scores and stuff like that. But you know, the way I see it is that from our infrastructure perspective, this procedure can be automated and it can be made dynamic, which is very, very important. So you could actually face in the future, you know, like a demand, you know, scaling licensing processes. So if you were successful, the artist would receive more, for example. Or if, you know, it's just more like a you know, like kind of a promotional thing, or it's like a piece that you really want to do because you like it, it's cool, then you would be okay with not getting so much and things like that. So this, I think, on top of the infrastructure that we provide, your service could run, or any other service could run to solve this like individually. But like Matt was saying before, you should be able to dip into a huge pool of artists that will provide you with like all kinds of licenses that you could use, you know. So I think today it's more like a business process issue, and just like micropayments, micro licensing stuff has you know, never. It's also stuck in processes from the 60s. like everything in the music industry, okay? So like old systems, old licensing systems, old, everything is like still physical on paper and contracts are not very dynamic and blah, blah, blah. It's really terrible. If you look at it from the inside, you would be like really sometimes ashamed, because from the outside, what you see in a music video is so cool, but inside it's really crap, you know? It's really crap. And then it adds up, and so many people have to ask so many people, so that we found it in the beginning of the digital transformation much easier to just do it and then afterwards ask the questions. That's also not good, but so then the next level needs to be like, you can do it, don't worry about how it works, it will be fostered and supported by blockchain. That's the only way to do it. You can do it, you know, it will be added, it will be complemented by AI. So AI will understand how long is the sequence you need. Is it related to what kind of platform is it related? What's your income out of this? And then so you can always fairly have a deal. And the way I see it is, you know, there will be hundreds of solutions that will provide, you know, interfaces for what you want to do, or will give you different, you know, artistic clearances and stuff like that, depending on the repertoire. So hopefully, let me not also do a fortune-telling thing here, but hopefully in the next 3 to 4 years, this should be an easy one for you to do.
A lot of people maybe don't understand the publishing game as much, but the copyright of a song, there's quite a few writers a lot of the time. For instance, Guns N' Roses, 5 of us shared the publishing, the writing. There's a lot of money there. So what happens is we sign with a publisher, and now he has algorithms on the internet that are able to, have you seen when it says this video has been blocked? You know, only recently Universal Publishing did a deal with Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook that gave him what's called a blanket license. That blanket license only is a certain amount of money that gets distributed amongst a bunch of people. So there's no real link back and transparency to that artist that wrote that said piece of music. So if you were to post your video on Artbit, for instance, we would already have collaborators and a blanket license, but the blockchain would have the data of that said song, and they've already allowed the license, let's say, but the blockchain could actually track that particular piece of music, and that artist would get paid for the amount of content provided, the amount of shares, the amount of views, based on direct source, right? Unlike YouTube, where they take the lion's share, and they get a very small fraction of 1 million views. The people promoting that content get maybe $1,000 from 1 million views. So this would be direct to the artist through the blockchain. And then your other art person that's behind you, same thing on the blockchain. They get a piece of it. And as the content provider, you get paid, right, on that token. If you start collect and you add a brand in that, that's where the money would come from in the Artbit world. And you'd be doing like a little bit of what we call product placement, if you will, in a way that's agreed by everybody, which could be done on a smart contract. You guys want to do cool stuff, but we're only going to put like skateboard products in, or like, you know, maybe like some Vans sneakers, or whatever you decide. It's happening all over the world anyway. And artists are much more cool with brands. When I came up in Guns N' Roses and the Cult and bands, we had nothing to do with brands. We didn't want to see it. We didn't care about the money. We were making money on records. And then down the line, now brands are a way for us to help monetize our career. So it's open, you know, it's like open to conversation. So that would be how you could create content and receive funds with all the collaborators getting paid.
I think Daniel and Pablo maybe both had quick comments on this. Please keep them very short, because I'd love to get at least one more question from the audience.
Mine is really short. That's, in your case, you're doing like tricks that you don't have to use like a soundtrack. But if you think about dancers, internet for dancers, they are mute. Because if they dance Billie Jean, Universal, you make sure they put down the videos. So that's something that I think blockchain will address in many platforms in the future. So that's it.
2 comments, one on the infrastructure and one on the interface. So the infrastructure, when we started an internet company in the mid-90s, it was beautiful. anyone could. You just plugged your router into someone else's lease line, and then you could then sell lease lines from that. And it was an amazing time because everything just worked. It was a protocol. And what I really want to emphasize is we need that in this space as well. So we can have all these blockchain providers, but they all need to speak to each other and pass your information along.
That's great, and artists might have a vote or maybe sit on the board. But there's a huge difference. Startups don't have deep pockets. We have no pockets. And the large companies, that's why I'm conflicted when I'm talking to, the universals of this world. The large companies do. So they have not just a leg up, they have legs, and they're running so much more. For me as a startup, by the time the open source is maybe available, or I get my team together, or I get the funding and all of the little tactical things, I'm at a huge, I don't know. I don't know your program enough, but am I at a huge disadvantage?
That
Great,
sounds
okay.
like a deal to me. You have all been incredibly patient.
I live in LA.
As we've gone way over time, but thank you. This has been a really dynamic discussion. Come ask them more questions, please.